So thanks, Aaron. I'm Josh Westgard from the University of Maryland in College Park, and want to give an update on what we've been up to. We've presented at this before, and I feel like in some ways I'm always just giving an update what we're up to, but I guess that's part of the point of the showcase. So that's what I'm going with. So, to give you a little bit of background, we've been Fedora users here at the University of Maryland since the 2000s. We had what I referred to last year as our legacy repository, which I'm pleased to report is now shut down. So we are now fully into our current repositories. We have a public user interface for digital collections that's based on Drupal. Which we also use for our website. We have a Rails slash Blacklight based application that's a locally developed application for managing page media content, and we call that application Archelon. That application, I think, is similar to a lot of what other folks in this meeting are probably using. We have a IIIF based manifest application and image viewer built on Mirador. We have obviously Solar Index for indexing the content, and we have an application that does image caching to make the display of large objects faster and better. We also have an application that does local vocabulary management. So that works in our infrastructure to help us managing the RDF and the namespaces and the other vocabularies that we're using that exist on the web outside of our control. In addition to that, we do use Avalon Media System for our streaming media. So we are now, as I said, out of the legacy repository, the Fedora 2 based. That's been shut down. And we now have this Archelon application for page media, Avalon for streaming media, and then public interface based in Drupal. This little diagram here gives you some idea about the ecosystem. I think you'll see it's very, like I said, it's very similar to probably what a lot of other folks are running. We've got here the Archelon application. You've got, it's primarily staff interface that connects them to the Fedora stack, which is made up of these various components. We also have command line tools for import and export of content that we can use, and that command line tool is also actually used in the Archelon application. There's uh, a version of it that's running in a so-called daemon mode on the server, and managing some of the things that are happening in the repository on the server side, but we also use it for local command line processing to do batch loading. So import and export. And then we do also have, obviously, public interface. That's the Drupal-based CMS. We have different harvesters happening through OAI PMH, and we have external preservation services through AP Trust. So what accomplishments have we had here in 2025? So I broke it down for the purposes of this presentation into two categories. So we were successful in retiring a lot of technical debt this year, which has felt really good. We retired our on-premises data center. So we used to run here in the library as a data center. And a few years ago, that got moved to a leased space at the campus lease, but it was still our hardware in that leased data center. And now that's retired, and we've moved completely over to AWS cloud hosted infrastructure. So there was a big project this year to do what's referred to as lift and shift, taking the applications out of our data center and putting them into AWS and basically running them as is and then making some changes where necessary, but basically just moving the the applications as they were. And that was facilitated by the fact that we were already using Kubernetes. And so we're now in Kubernetes in what's called EKS in AWS. Um, we also, as I mentioned, retired the Fedora 2 application. So that is at last, long last, gone. And we migrated all the legacy content out of that application into our current application. So this past year was focused mainly on the page media. We had done the streaming media um, earlier. Um, as part of that, once we got everything moved over, we realized that there was search capabilities in that legacy repository that weren't really supported in the new repository because we had a very limited subset of our content living in the new repository prior to this. And so we had to turn to developing a new and improved search for the Archelon application. And by extension, that same index is also used for the public interface. And so that improved search also has benefits on the public user interface side. And we focused on that this year to getting that developed after we got the migration done. We also this year, some other technical debt that we retired was we were upgrading all of our Rails applications. So um, many of our Rails-based, a lot of them pretty small applications, but many of those Rails-based applications had gotten pretty out of date. And so there was an effort to bring everything up to current Rails versions. And actually, in the course of doing that, we determined that for a lot of those applications, it was going to be about the same amount of work to re-implement them as Flask or Django applications. And so that's the route we ended up going because Python has become more and more central to the development work that we do here. And so we're kind of less interested going forward in using Rails and more likely to want to use Python where we can. And so yeah, we ended up re-implementing some of those small applications in Flask and Django, but obviously in current versions. And then finally, the other piece of technical debt, we did move our course reserves. So we had implemented Avalon a few years ago, and it's worked really well for us. And it does support has features that support using it for course reserves as well as for digital collections. And so we decided to retire our legacy course reserves streamer and move all the streaming media for course reserves into Avalon. And that project is just wrapping up now. Okay, so the second category of accomplishment I refer to as building community. So we found over the years that within the libraries, I think probably many people here have seen in your own situation that there's there can be silos within the organization that there's even though you're all colleagues and you all work together, you don't necessarily not everybody always feels in the loop. And so we definitely felt that there were some silos in our organization that the stakeholders for digital collections, who might be the people who are the curators of that content, of the original content, or the archivists who control the archival materials that are in the digital repository, might not always be aware of what's happening or might feel a little bit out of the loop. And so we wanted to come up with ways to break down those barriers. And so a few years ago, we did more intentionally adopt agile development processes in the libraries. So we actually have two Scrum teams in the libraries working on the public website as well, and then my team working on digital collections. And we when we set those up, we wanted to have those teams obviously have because in part of the agile methodology is to have frequent contact with users, and so we needed to come up with ways to do that. And so we took inspiration from what we've seen work in the Fedora community, in the Avalon community, in OCFL, and decided to create sort of open community meetings. And so every sprint, we have what we call the open sprint review at the end of the sprint. And this is a chance. That's the meeting I was at this morning that I was referring to earlier. It's a long meeting. It's a 2-hour meeting. But it helped us create has helped us create buy-in from our partners by having an open meeting that they feel um, empowered to come to in order to raise their concerns or their issues or just to find out more what's going on. I think is very, very beneficial, obviously. And it also has allowed us to make some of the invisible work that we do day to day to be more visible to our users. So I referred to retiring technical debt, for example, in just making sure that all of our Rails applications were running current versions. That's not work that an end user is necessarily going to even be aware of or really even see any benefit from, other than the fact that, as we all know, if you don't keep your software up to date, obviously you're going to have other problems. So that's the kind of thing that we can surface in these open review meetings and make it more visible. And so that gives people a better sense of, just what's happening. Otherwise, they see long periods when there's no new features that are being released. What are they doing? What's going on over there? And then this allows them to have some visibility into that. And finally, it's been really important for us as an opportunity to gather feedback. So as we all know, it's important to talk to your users and to get their input and to build features that meet their needs. And it really does make your work easier if you have a way to do that. And it's been a very effective way for us to be able to get feedback because we have it on a regular schedule. We don't have to set up appointments to talk to people specifically, but we just have this regular meeting that we can always rely upon. And it's been quite positive for, I think, how we feel, how we understand what our users want and how we can meet those needs in a more effective way. So yeah, so that's the high level overview. Now I want to talk about some of the new features that we've implemented in our Fedora-based application. So here is a snapshot of the interface for the Archelon, what I referred to before as the Archelon application. It is for managing page media content in the repository. And you'll see here some examples of some correspondence we have, and there's a photograph at the top there. And this is from the Catherine Porter correspondence or Catherine Porter collection. I can actually, I think, more effectively show you this if I just pop over to, so we can look at this live. This is available. This is right now. It is very soon to be released in production, but right now just on our QA server. So you see here, it's in the QA environment. So if I go, a presentation set is what we, basically it's a concept that we introduced to be effectively a digital collection that's exposed as a digital collection. That's to distinguish it from the archival collection where the materials come from, and also to distinguish it from the administrative set in Fedora. So we have arranged our content into hierarchical structure to make management of permissions a little bit easier in the Fedora repository. And so it was important for us to distinguish grouping of stuff by administrative set, which is like permissions and access control, and presentations is how it's presented to the users. And so presentation set is a concept. We took inspiration from the Samvera community. They have something kind of similar, going back to earlier versions of Samvera. Um, so yeah, so this is the Catherine and Porter collection. And if I go in and look at an item, you see here our example of our viewer application. Should actually go and look at one of the letters. Um, and so we got our viewer application. This is powered, of course, by the IIIF server and a IIIF manifest that's based on the information in Solr. And You see the metadata here. Some of the things that you can edit this obviously, and we have publication workflow where you can unpublish and publish things. We have yeah different metadata, and then if I go back, some of the new search features, we can now these are all hyperlinked here. This was something that we didn't have before. So when you've got results from your search that are in two different archival collections, you want to see more of the items in that collection, you can actually just click on those, and then you could even expand your search by taking off the Catherine and Porter correspondence, and you see anything that was in the Anne Heinze papers then at that point. But you get the idea of some of these improvements with this new version. So there's just another screenshot there showing you the one of these letters. The other piece of this that's, I think, interesting is that we do now have full text search for these materials. So for select collections in our digital collections, we've gotten HOCR files to go along with them. And so this is an example of that, that there would be that. I mean, you don't see it here, but there would be an HOCR file along with this, and should power, at least to some degree, a full text search. Now, with a handwritten document like that one, the accuracy of the OCR is probably not great, but that's another feature in this new version. That's just giving you a fuller view of all the metadata that we have. So lastly, to talk about future plans, at the 2024 showcase, so we outlined the following goals. We wanted to upgrade our Avalon. Check, we did that. We released Archelon 2.0. We're very close to that. That should happen before the end of the year. We have these new improved search capabilities, and many of those are going to be in the next version of Archelon. Some will be released in the spring. And then we did launch this digital collections community to better integrate with our users. And we did the planning for moving to AWS. We did not get to Fedora 6. So that's actually on our goals for 2026. We plan to release Archelon 2.1. That's going to have a few of those new search features that I referred to. We're also going to be focused on accessibility in 2026. That'll involve improving our Mirador-based viewer, and I think will also likely involve development of some alternative format generation within the repository. So, for example, taking OCR and turning it into plain text and allowing users to download the plain text of a document if that format better suits them than, say, the page images. Also, perhaps PDF generation, although I don't know how accessible, how useful that is for accessibility, but some other alternative format generation features I think are on the horizon for that repository. And then we do want to upgrade Archelon to use Fedora 6. And when Avalon gets to that point too, we'll be upgrading the Avalon. And then I think we would perhaps like to explore more of a cloud native architecture. So right now, when we did the data center migration, as I said, it was lift and shift. And so the applications didn't really change. So in the case of Fedora, we are running, the file storage for Fedora is basically a big EBS volume, elastic byte store, which is more expensive than S3. And so we have looked at the reference implementation for running Fedora in AWS more natively. And so when we do the Fedora 6 migration, that's something we'll be looking at. What can we do to be more efficient and run it more of a cloud native way that I think would suit our use case uh, a little better. So yeah, thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions.
That's awesome. Thank you. Any questions for Josh? I have a question for you, and we've been trying to like suss this answer out. So when you said the reference implementation for Fedora and AWS, is that the one from two showcases ago where Josh Badal from AWS came? And have you found any more details on that reference implementation as of late?
No,
Okay.
do not know any more details about it other than that presentation. That's
Yeah.
going back to that. And you know, uh, I have questions about you know, what makes sense for our particular use case that may not align exactly with that reference implementation, but I think it's at least a starting point. And so that was something that we intend to look at. I don't know if there are others here who have more information maybe, or has anybody tried it?
I mean, Josh doesn't work at AWS anymore, and I
Oh, I
know
see.
Doran, I see you're still here. Your kind of architecture and infrastructure was based on that reference implementation as well, but we have not been able to get a hold of anybody at AWS to talk more about that implementation and the status
I
of it.
see.
So,
Right. Yeah, we were working. Yeah, thanks, Aaron, and thanks, Josh, for the presentation. Great to see what you guys are up to. And yeah, we were working with Josh with his reference implementation. And then he went MIA, and I don't know, and we even just repeated requests to other AWS reps. Haven't really turned anybody in the kind of education space really, and so we've been working with their other reps, but they
Okay.
certainly haven't put in the detailed time that he did. We did get to we ended up going in production with Fedora 6 and AWS using that reference implementation. And I was hoping to even talk about that here a bit, but we've been kind of shut down for a bit, just coming back. So
Right.
we're ramping things back. But yeah,
Yep.
we do have a Fedora 6 in AWS using that reference implementation and heavily tuned to kind of what we needed. So S3 didn't work too well. We had to use a combination of EFS and also EBS, as you say, for various parts of the stack. And we're
Right.
still tuning and optimizing. But in a nutshell, yeah, we did kind of base it off of that reference implementation. And I think with some tuning and customizations to your environment, I think it's a reasonable approach to take. And I'd be happy to talk about it with you or anybody else offline. I did have a question. So if I recall, you had a couple different Fedoras, Josh. Is this, are you on 4 in AWS, or what are your flavors of Fedora these
Yes.
days?
So Archelon is on 4, I believe. I'm actually not 100% sure that I think Avalon's on 5, or I we're on Avalon 7.8, but I don't believe it's on 6 yet, not Fedora 6. So we have a separate Fedora for Avalon that's also in AWS. And that runs very much just under the hood. We don't really touch it. The Fedora in for Archelon, which is also in AWS, is Fedora 4.775, I think, 4.74 or 5, whatever the latest is. Um, and that's the one that we'd definitely like to upgrade to 6 in the coming year, or if 7 is out, we would go to 7 directly, or you know, through 6 and then to 7, hopefully. But at least to get it to 6. That's what we hope. And we used to run, as I said, Fedora 2, and that's all shut down now. So
Okay, thanks. So then you're on Fedora 4 in
4.
AWS. You did
Yes.
lift the ship. Okay, yeah. Okay, good.
Yep.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see how that goes. We came from 3 on-prem, and our goal was 6 in AWS. And originally we wanted to do it in 2 phases, go from 3 to 6, and then from on-prem to the cloud, and just to reduce risk. And our management decreed otherwise. And we ended up reaching the goal maybe a bit later than we'd wanted, and it was certainly riskier. But yeah, we are kind of curious to see how in cloud migration from 4 to 6 goes. So yeah, look forward to hearing about that.
Yeah.
There's some comments in the chat. If you have the chat there, Emily and Beth are both from Emory, but saying that they're pretty sure they didn't use the reference implementation, but they have Fedora 4 with S3 as well as Fedora 6 with S3. And Beth was just interested in hearing about the issues with S3. And I'm not sure if that was for Dorn. That might have been a question for Dorn, actually.
We have not,
or you
since
as
we
well.
have. Well, we haven't yet.
That's right.
It's all EBS in our case. So that's just like a big disk in the cloud.
Right.
And so it's much more analogous to what would happen if you were running Fedora locally on a server that you ran.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, Dorn, if you are able to speak about what you guys had experienced with S3 and why you had to make that change. I think it was performance based, wasn't it?
Right, yeah. So I think if you look at Josh Badal's reference implementation with Fedora 6, he was using S3 for storage for the OCFL layer within Fedora 6. And we tried that initially at first as well, but it just ran into lots of performance issues in migrating large amounts of data, both from on-prem to S3, and then indexing it into the Fedora database originally. And so after lots of trial and error, we ended up just ditching S3 for that portion of the stack and using mostly EFS, I think. So primarily it was performance in getting the OCFL layer, what ended up being hundreds of millions of OCFL files from the migrated Fedora 3, and then being able to index that into the Fedora database in reasonable time. But yeah, I don't want to, happy to talk about that offline or another time without, I don't want to take up Josh's slot here.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks. I was just curious about if it was like a technical issue with getting it to work, but no, performance makes sense. Thank you.
So
Awesome.
one thing
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
one thing that I have thought about in that regard, and I don't know if this is a workable solution or not. I need to work with our developers to talk about it. But I think there might be a middle ground where you could use EBS or EFS volume for sort of your content that's say your frequently accessed material, like your access files that are stored in Fedora, but then take your preservation masters and put those into S3. And potentially even I've considered whether potentially even the more colder storage layers of S3 might be appropriate for some of our preservation masters. So like those files are not frequently accessed. We cache all of our images so that when a user calls up an image from with the Mirador viewer, it's not pulling from Fedora unless an image is missing, for example. And so I feel like those preservation files could actually go into very cold storage and you'd save money that way. And I think how you would have to do that in Fedora is you'd have to use the external, like if it's in cold storage, you'd have to use the external file feature to say this is over here, but it's not really in the Fedora.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually what we ended up doing. I mean, we used the external model heavily coming from 3, and we kind of kept that in line. We didn't really do a lot of data model adjustments. So what we have is what you described, Josh. And And I think we've explored this a bit. Maybe it'd be worth having a group discussion sometime with whoever's interested. But yeah, I completely agree. I mean, for the reasons you mentioned, it makes sense for us to have these items in kind of cold storage that can go from S3 down to Glacier or Glacier Deep, and that's our intent. We're not quite there yet. So we really just migrated our object structures, and we're still in process of actually migrating our binaries to AWS. We're going to end up with a hybrid architecture. But I agree. The interesting thing to me, sort of architecturally, is where you want to position Fedora in that regard, right? So we've already heard a couple presentations yesterday and the day before on, well, use Fedora sort of as the preservation layer, and then maybe have like a Hyrax with Postgres combo for the access portion, and maybe that could kind of align to some degree with people who are looking to Fedora OCFL for the preservation aspect. So a lot of interesting knobs to turn there, but yeah, I agree, Josh. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. A great discussion, certainly at the end. And I did post a link in the chat to that reference implementation presentation that we were just talking about. You can go back and watch what was shared there. And I do have the slide deck, and I think it's linked in the YouTube, but if it's not and you are interested in the slide deck, just reach out to me and I'm happy to provide access to that. So, but that is the most up-to-date information that we have on it, unfortunately. So that's where we stand. But congratulations on getting out of Fedora 2, first of all, to UMD. I mean, this has been like a kind of like not like a running joke, but a long tail.
Oh,
of
it's a
getting
running
there
joke
for you.
for sure.
Yeah, you guys had a party and everything. So
we had a whole party, with the Fedora 2. We did not smash the old hardware or anything like that.
Okay. Would have been fun though, light it up, right? Like just
Right.
And I was just looking, there was a presentation on the first day from Chris Colvard, who's the product owner or technical lead for Avalon. And Avalon 8 does run on Fedora 6 now. So that was kind of one of the news that they wanted to share. So if when you guys get there, you will get Fedora 6 with Avalon 8.
Right. That's great. So if we get to Avalon 8, then hopefully in 2026 we'll be all Fedora 6. So I'd love that.
Great. Yeah. We can't wait we'll hear about it next year at Showcase, right? We'll just keep doing the UMD updates. It's a recurring event.